to contribute to the survey. We know that it was an intense survey, and so we're going to, this is the second of 3 focus groups where our focus will be on supporting the implementation of comprehensive plans. Let's see, how do I change this slide? There we go. Oops, went too far. So as noted, there are 3 meetings. We had the first one last Friday. We got some very good input from the regional councils because we conducted the meeting as hybrid at their regular meeting, biannual with the Municipal Planning Assistance Program. And today we'll focus on supporting implementation of comp plans. We've roughly separated the survey into a third for each meeting to keep it manageable. Jody Sapphire, who I see highlighted right now, so I guess the highlight may not be may be different for everyone. She is a special assistant to the commissioner at DACF, and she'll be helping us with facilitation once we give you an overview of the results. So jumping into the survey, as anyone who responded or works with growth management knows, it is complex, and so was this survey. We gave you 31 questions, but we cheated by giving you 5 or 6 parts in about 13 of them. We were looking for input on actions to encourage growth in growth areas, barriers to doing so, strategies to implement the goal of directing that growth, how to improve and streamline comp plan preparation. We looked at that on Friday. Input on what you need to prepare them, input on revising the statute itself, and also to support housing development in the crisis that we're in with respect to housing. And then finally, input on the utility of the review process itself. We got great feedback on that on Friday and in the survey. And then the last questions are kind of demographics. We have many thoughtful written comments. They are summarized in a story map representation. I believe Joan is going to put the story map that provides the survey results in the chat. And if you want to do a deep dive into those comments, they are all provided verbatim on a linked page. So as noted, we're at the second focus group, and we've divvied up the questions as listed here to try and look at this overall review process, how to support implementation, and then tomorrow we'll be prioritizing technical assistance needs. One thing I wanted to ask, let me see if I can shift the screen to seeing all of you. Can I see a show of hands of how many people are, let's see, who did not come on Friday and are new to this presentation? Actually, I can't see it while I'm in presenter mode. Joan, are you able to see a show of hands of people who were not here on Friday?
I see a couple. I'm seeing initials, I'm not seeing names. Let me see, hang on a second.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got some.
A couple. Okay, so I think I see 5 or 6. They sort of scroll past me, but I don't see the full screen. All right,
yes,
well,
6.
6. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to gauge how much detail to go into here. So the story map of the survey results is linked there. It's in the chat. A couple of things that I'll talk about here. I'm not going to pull up the story map just for in the interests of time, but the comments are summarized in the story map. Ashley did a really good job of pulling a lot of detail into those summary comments. If you scroll down, you then see the actual numbers of respondents in bar charts, and then we decided to pull the percentages pro and con just to summarize things into pie charts. And those are the ones I'm going to use in this presentation. If you want to open and close the individual comments, you can hit that little plus sign or the X to close it out, because it opens up on the right-hand screen, and you're not going to want to have that sitting there. Then for those who want to take the really deep dive, the upper right-hand corner, once you've opened up the individual comments, takes to a new web page. You have to hover over each comment to see the detail. And then if you really want to get in there, you can actually click the whole thing and pull it over into a Word document, because some comments were extremely long. But if you have any difficulty, we can give you some help. And in scrolling through the survey, I found, because I've been pulling it out for this presentation, refreshing the page takes you to the top, but you really have to do that every now and again because it kind of gets all separated and the question doesn't relate to the thing at the right. So refresh a lot. Okay. Okay. Whoops. So the flow today is just like on Friday, with the focus on supporting implementation. I'll do a half-hour presentation, and then we'll have a hour plus discussion. These are the questions that we're going to be asking you, and that'll be the facilitated conversation that Jody's going to provide. I will go through who responded reasonably quickly, but with 5 additional new people, I'm not going to be ever so quick. Do keep in mind these responses are in the survey map at the end of the survey. So what region do you most...
Judy, let me just interrupt you. I actually think it may be that there are only 6 people who attended last Friday. I may have misunderstood, but I think that the majority of people are new.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
regardless, I'll just go into this and know that you can find it on the story map for more detail if I go too quickly. Okay, thank you. So most respondents, the majority, 14, responded are closely associated with multiple regions or statewide. And then the preponderance was Southern Maine at GPCOG, SMPDC, and the Mid-Coast. Eastern Maine Development Corporation was the third there on the list, around the greater Bangor area. That makes sense. So down to the bottom, lesser responses from Northern Maine and Washington County. I will note that Lincoln County responded and gave us lots of input on Friday, so that this number is a wee bit misleading from the original data. What city or town do people closely associate with? Those are listed. And the number of people who said it's multiple communities was the majority, 34 people. And we also wanted to know, have you done this? Have you participated in drafting or reviewing a comp plan? The significance of 2012 is that is the last time that the rules were changed for the review process of comprehensive plans. Majority, 63 people out of, I should have said there are 74 respondents to the survey. Yes, they've been involved in drafting or review. What was their role? Primarily municipal staff, regional planning staff, and comp plan committee members. The purple line, the no response, that corresponds directly to the people who say, I didn't participate, either no or no response. 8 and 3 adds up to 11. Further down, just in overall numbers, consultants, interested citizens, state agency personnel, planning boards, and the other not listed was I believe, a town clerk, municipal official. So let's get into the results here. First question for today is asking what the local barriers are to encourage growth in locally designated growth areas. Remember, we're talking about implementation. So the question is over here on the left, identify the influence of local barriers. And then there were, in this case, 6 questions related to those barriers. I will only be talking or showing the pie charts for 2 at most out of each of these, and I'll just go over the other ones verbally. It just takes too long to hit you with all those pie charts, and you can get them in the results. So lack of infrastructure capacity and local opposition were the 2 most influential barriers. You can see local opposition at 64%, lack of infrastructure at almost 69%. There is some ambiguity with this because lack of infrastructure capacity could be none, inadequate capacity of existing, or insufficient funds to repair and upgrade. So fear not, comments and additional questions will get into these details further than some ambiguity that may be showing up here. Here again, local opposition to implementing comp plans was huge, and this comes up later. The lack of capacity for training for local CEOs and for local officials is right up there, just under 60%. They were the next most significant barriers. And this really speaks to the significance and importance of integrating the code officer certification and training program back to within the main Office of Community Affairs. It used to be at the State Planning Office, and the need for the support to regional councils who really provide a lot of this training or facilitate it happening. Adoption of rate of growth ordinances and growth area exemptions were seen as less influential barriers at about 50%, but a lot of people really had no opinion about it. Rate of growth ordinances appear to be significant, really only in a few communities, likely in southern Maine. And then the growth area exemption is something that is very much a rural, low growth phenomenon. So shifting from local to, oh no, pardon me, I finished out the comments on local barriers. I mentioned before this local opposition. This can often come from vocal minorities within the community, and they can have an outsized impact on whether things get adopted. The limited financial, technical, and staffing resources comes up a lot. And it will echo through all of these presentations. It has to do with hiring and retention of staff, especially code enforcement and other essential personnel. Outdated zoning that particularly what's known as Euclidean zoning that strictly separates uses from one another is a real issue. There are many calls for reforming zoning laws to support more compact and mixed use patterns. And in many cases, the zoning can contradict comprehensive plans, so that can complicate development efforts. Lack of infrastructure, again, you'll see that. Lack of consequences when comp plans are not implemented. You say wonderful things in your comp plan, but then they're not implemented at the local level. So our conclusions here, and we're going to be coming back to these conclusions later on, is that engagement strategies are really essential in addressing some of these barriers, to address the resistance to change, to help with public engagement training, and in doing so, clearer guidance is needed from the state to show the benefits of planning, the benefits of mixed-use development, assistance with defining growth in rural areas and place types, and also assistance with design, livability, using visual tools to help people sort of get rid of the myths and the misunderstandings about what the compact development might look like. And then clearly the conclusion that we need to infrastructure investment to foster efficient development. So shifting from local barriers now to state barriers. Again, here's the question over on the left-hand side, identify the influence of state barriers. I'm going to talk about the lack of financial incentives, which you can see has 73% moderate and high influence by respondents. And also one person's comment is the state is not following its own statutes on growth-related capital investments. The next one I'll highlight is the lack of guidance in identifying types of growth areas. We heard this last week and we're hearing it again today. There's also, in terms of the other bullets here, I'll just let you know that the lack of a requirement to adopt zoning ordinances and the final bullet on lack of requirement or lack of coordination among state agencies, and then the final bullet, they're all roughly around 50 to 55%, though the lack of coordination among state agencies was the highest. I'm happy to report that there's several activities in the works to address this, one being ongoing coordination among the Beginning with Habitat program and the Municipal Planning Assistance Program. There was positive response at the first focus group to the idea of a symposium among state agency providers to give them an overview of what data is required, what format, and how to review a comprehensive plan. So we talked about, we're discussing that as one action strategy here. And then, the creation of the main Office of Community Affairs will bring under one roof municipal planning, floodplain, housing opportunities, code enforcement training, coastal program, and resilient Maine. So that's all good, bringing them under one roof, but it also has a mandate to foster interagency collaboration. So I think there's definitely movement afoot to address this issue of the lack of state coordination. The not requiring building code enforcement in towns below 4,000 was seen as far less of a barrier. That is, it was only moderate or high of an influence in 30% of respondents, though there were some people with very strong opinions in the comments that it's the main uniform building code should be enforced either statewide. Right now, it's only on with towns less than greater than 4,000. So either that it should be enforced statewide or in towns, say, above 2,500 or 3,000. So there's ongoing conversation there. Okay, so the comments about the influence of state barriers. Complex, slow regulatory processes inhibit development. That was identified at the state level, mostly with the Site Location of Development Act, but also that there's a patchwork of standards locally, and that can really confuse and slow down. So the need for consistency among laws, as well as staff capacity, enforcement capacity, and that measures to support growth could be improved through permit by rule and other ways to streamline complex regulatory processes. There were observations about a lack of state and regional coordination. So we've talked about the lack of state coordination, but also that there's fragmented regional planning, which makes it difficult for towns to implement comprehensive growth strategies. And this can inhibit consistent implementation and code enforcement. Again, and we'll say it out practically on every comment and slide, limited shortage of financial, technical, and staffing resources. It's at the local level, it's at the regional level, and it's at the state level too. This absence of meaningful enforcement, incentives for enforcement, that was definitely identified. Also, people were saying, look, the state is promoting sprawl itself. There's an overemphasis on highways versus infrastructure to support compact development and a lack of uniform standards, and that pushes development to rural areas where there's minimal regulation. Insufficient training and guidance. So our conclusion is addressing these through greater training and technical support, applying state goals consistently, providing support to the regional councils as an efficient way, and then this whole area of stronger and consistent code enforcement, whether that's broader enforcement, better training, or achieving some regional efficiencies. So there was a sort of overall question about other barriers. There's opposition to mandatory zoning, and yet there are people who have very strong opinions that it should be mandatory. That's going to be a tough nut to crack. It comes up again later on. Some people recommended there should be financial consequences to towns and cities who oppose housing developments. Like you don't get the next grant because you shut down an affordable housing proposal. Our conclusion could be pretty difficult to enforce. Pretty difficult to enforce. People recommended tying funding to plan implementation and ordinances that implement the comp plan. So related to that is incentives to focus growth in growth areas. Again, lack of infrastructure, similar to lack of capacity, this lack of infrastructure comes up all the time. One thing I'll point to here in terms of our conclusions is I've been serving on the Infrastructure Rebuilding and Resilience Commission. The draft report was released yesterday with a press release. Actually, I could put that in the chat. I don't know if you've got that press release, Joan, if you can get access to it. Sorry, I didn't give you a heads up on that, but that draft interim report came out yesterday. The commission will work until May of next year to finalize the recommendations. The single most important or prevalent question by the press yesterday was, how are you going to, have you got a budget for all this infrastructure that's being called for to build resilience? And the call will be, and we discussed at the meeting yesterday, perhaps a state capital investment plan. It's been called for, as Charlie Colgan said, for 42 years. And the reason is that this dollar spent on resilience saves $13 on impact and rebuilding. That comes from the National Chambers of Commerce. It's also FEMA studies. So as we identify the infrastructure we need to make more resilient and build, we really need to integrate where it should be built and how it should encourage compact development in where existing infrastructure exists. This question was phrased a little differently. This is we asked people to choose 3 out of 7. No, 1 was no response. 3 out of 6 potential strategies to best support housing in designated growth areas. And you can see, again, funding for infrastructure is always at the top. Incentives to redevelop vacant buildings was another funding identified, or need identified, and encouragement of mixed use development standards. Lower down, but still people were identifying it, density bonuses to encourage affordable housing, reduced and flexible development standards, and relaxation of parking standards. Parking comes up a lot. I mean, we see it on the listserv all the time. The reason that I identified in the comments that the relaxation of parking standards was kind of not as stressed as highly is that it's definitely a solution for more urbanized areas, not necessarily in some of the more rural communities. So the comments on these strategies indicate the need for greater state collaboration, that's said multiple times. The fact that regional analyses of housing need are really important, and they should be aligned with labor market and employer needs. The infrastructure challenges here got further into the details because we're talking about supporting housing. While sewer and water are important, it's also infrastructure incentives for sprinkler systems, septic, alternative septic, utilities, and sometimes oh, I lost my train of thought. I said alternative septic. Sorry, lost that one. But incentives for improvements to support housing came up here multiple times. Flexible standards are commonly recommended, but one of the things that the comments brought out was that people really need to understand, okay, so what does it mean? And what does it look like? And give me some visual examples or case studies about how they function. Workforce and expertise ran the gamut, from those who plan, design, and engineer to those who actually build affordable housing or housing in general. And then zoning and code reform was identified. Some links were provided to Smart Growth America form-based codes and additional recommendations for pre-approved building types. I will say that, well, I'll talk to about the pre-approved building types in a minute. There was ambiguity there. So our conclusions, again, same thing, that we focus funding and TA for mixed use development and growth areas. The range of incentives for utility and redevelopment there's detail in these answers. This came out, mentoring and internship. This also came out as a recommendation in the Infrastructure Rebuilding Commission yesterday. Pardon me, was it infrastructure? Yes. Rebuilding and Resilience Commission. There are a lot of young people who are interested in helping with this work, and the opportunities for those of us working in this field to be mentors and bring in interns are legion, and we should all collectively think about doing that. Also, the strategies supporting housing are very similar to TA, which is codes, regional development, state and regional development of models on codes, and then how to both train people on both adapting them to the circumstances and adopting them. Okay, moving to state actions in law or rule to improve implementation. We had, a bit of a qualification here. The state's ability is limited here with home rule. So we asked a few questions about what can the state do to the growth management law or in rule to improve implementation. The two I'll comment on here have to do with establishing standards that grant preferred funding status for smart growth strategies. This is very similar. This is what Vermont has done. So there isn't necessarily review of your entire comp plan. It's designated areas. And if you pursue certain strategies, you get higher funding status. The one above this, the first one, state provides multiple strategies for communities to select from. This is something that Utah has done. It was 50% seen as effective. The pre-approved building types, this is where I wanted to comment or tell you about one of the comments that we received. Someone indicated they were kind of perplexed by this because, and it had about 50% people saying, yeah, it's a good idea. But this commenter noted that, the private sector provides these now, and that state or local intervention and expenditure really is not necessary. The one qualification on that comment was that in historic districts, that may be an exception. So looking at another of the pie charts here, tying financial incentives to adoption of growth areas and place types. Again, 78% seen as this would be effective or highly effective. And then, as repeated in multiple answers, strong support, 76% for technical assistance models to improve implementation. Requiring growth-related capital investments aligned with the growth management law was seen only as effective, but less so, only 50%. So let's take a look at the comments here. You can see that this starts to repeat itself. The need for money and technical assistance. There's quite a debate in the comments around the accountability issue of getting zoning ordinances actually implemented if they've been recommended in a comp plan. Some people said require state review of local ordinances so that they do reflect what the comp plan said. Others said we need regional planning boards that can override local planning boards who don't implement their plans. And a recommendation in the current statute for not 10% affordable housing should be mandated. And then someone else says these plans have no influence and they should be completely divorced from funding. So this issue of mandating versus incentivizing is not going to go away. It's going to be a legislative choice, much like LD 2003 was. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Then let's see. People say bring back planning and implementation. We're saying okay, and support regional planning. I thought this was a creative one. People said provide funding and incentives if a town forms an implementation committee and maintains it and really takes implementation to the next level. I thought that was a pretty great idea. Okay, the next several questions talk about ideas for agreement or disagreement with growth management law revision. First one was,
Judy?
yes.
Judy, do you want to go back a slide for a moment? Did you want to skip over the conclusions or address those?
Kind of doing the conclusions at the same time. I guess I did skip
Sure.
over one or two there. Sorry about that. Yeah,
No,
I tend to jump around the slides, but I did miss the conclusion about providing guidance that enables local adoption, and that is a significant one. Thank you, Jody. So this is in the provision of models, platforms where you can go and download those models, case studies, opt-in standards, and that suite of strategies, which is kind of the Utah example. And I think I touched on the rest of these. I might, the conclusion about bringing back planning and implementation grants might add to this about supporting both regional planning and local implementation funding. So I might modify that slide. Okay, so agreement and disagreement with law revisions. So one was, and we had like 4 or 5 questions here. So should the statutes be comprehensively updated so definitions are consistent? Very strong agreement. Should rate of growth ordinances, which have been identified as a barrier to affordable housing, should they be prohibited given the crisis we're in? There was somewhat of agreement, 42%, lower than most of these questions. A lot of, I don't know, neither disagree, don't know. And some strong disagreement on that one. The next 2 questions had to do with requiring that comp plans be supported by an analysis of relevant data. The first one being whether it's in rule, 72% support, and then the next, not or, but as determined by the local planning committee, close to 61%. So there was some misunderstanding that this was sort of either or. So just want to be clear that respondents in the comments said data from both sources is relevant. That was intended. Another respondent noted that many local committees really don't know what data is relevant or needed. And so the state provision and determination in rule is significant. So clearly data must be generated both in rule and locally, depending on what information is needed. And then the last question asked about what about adding additional state agencies to the statutory list that requires state funds be awarded for plan implementation and growth-related capital investments, that those be directed to growth areas. Reasonably strong agreement here. Fair amount of ambivalence, though, 35%. So the comments here were definitely supporting a supportive. They were advocating a more supportive and streamlined planning framework to empower communities. So over to the conclusion, clearly improve data delivery and reduce the quantity that's required. That's also related to the comment that data requirements are too cumbersome. Some commented on the comp plan committee structure, that it needs to be more expansive, that again, local committees can be dominated by a very narrow cross-section. This is something that the regional councils can help with. It's something that's literally in the contracts that the councils have with the state to help towns have a expansive committee structure that includes multiple voices. Maybe we should adjust the rate of growth or portion of the statute. People identified that it's in there. We could strengthen it so that it limits rate of growth outside rather than within growth areas, which is the way it's been used. Someone commented empowering the state to ensure plans are professionally produced. I'm not entirely sure what that means or how that would be implemented. Very strong recommendations about flexibility and implementation focus in terms of how the law is revised. Also that the long-term visioning is critical, but it needs to be tied to those short-term actions. And then if you're revising the law, that legislation be coordinated so that it's the full scope of the law and its interactions with other state laws are addressed to prevent unintended consequences. So our conclusions are already mentioned, improving data and reducing the quantity, guidance, further guidance on how to help towns with the committee structure, public engagement, that's come up before. Visioning, there's a handbook that's 24 years old. It needs updating. It also needs scaling to the size of communities. And then statutory change that considers the full scope of the law and related laws. So I hope that hasn't been too long, a little bit longer than I was hoping. So I'm going to pass the baton now to Jody to help facilitate a conversation about your reactions, any surprises you saw, and whether we missed anything. And one thing I'll point out is that all of the comments and conclusions slides follow. So we can, you don't have to remember everything you just heard. So I'll pass the baton to you, Jody. Should I leave this slide up to get started?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Judy. That was a ton of information, but hopefully it was in a format, particularly if you were listening into the first meeting last Friday, that, you know, these are of a piece. These all have to do with implementation. So hopefully it felt cohesive to you all. But what we thought we would do, similar to last Friday, is go back and look at this slide, which will go question by question and just get your reactions both to what you heard from Judy about the results, the comments that were pulled out as being sort of the most dominant comments, and then the conclusions that the program has drawn from that. And just open it up for reaction. If you want to raise your hand, if you have any comment, you know, either if we want to start with general reactions, any surprises that occurred to you. A brave soul to start. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'll be the icebreaker here.
Thank you.
One of the things that I was thinking about from the last session, and that I'm thinking about now, is the I guess interplay between like the regional and state resources and efforts and the local. I am admittedly relatively new to actual like being in a municipal local government, especially in a small town. But I got the sense that a lot of focus was going to the regional, and I feel like there's a lot of problems or issues or opportunities at the local level that municipalities are facing that need to be addressed. And I think that especially with the home rule, I think that I worry that a lot of the conversation and planning like lends itself to being kind of top down. But with the home rule, it's like you can't make a lot of people do certain things. And I think that making sure that we, I don't know if it's like empower municipalities or help municipalities with resources or guidance or culture, whatever it is, that I think that we would benefit a lot from making sure that there's a healthy dose of this kind of like bottom up policy that can help encourage planning. And I know that kind of consolidating resources, whether it's regional or county or state, is makes a lot of sense, and there's some real opportunity there. I just really, I'm concerned that focusing too much up there doesn't solve a lot of the problems, and specifically with implementation, since that's where I think all of this kind of has to funnel through, is like
Sure.
the local zoning codes.
Sure, that's great. So you raise a really important question, particularly, or raise a very important issue, particularly given home rule, of whether there's the right balance of allocation of resources and effort at the regional versus at the very local level. So appreciate you raising that. Other comments and thoughts, things that, general reactions that you have to this this summary, or any surprises? Stephanie, go right ahead.
I just wanted to kind of respond to that question too. You know, I work at a regional planning organization. And one of the things, I think some of that focus that's been on, kind of consolidating and providing resources maybe to regional planning organizations that particularly in areas where there are more rural communities with few or almost no staff. I think a lot of the regional planning organizations provide that staff to smaller communities. And so we actually just came out of a meeting today with one of our rural communities to try to figure out how they can do a comp plan for very little funding. And so, I think that's kind of maybe that's the intent of a lot of what you're seeing around, the enhancement of regional resources. I think a lot of that does funnel down to to supporting local communities. It's just tough for communities to find staff and to support full-time staff to do a lot of that work, as I'm guessing you probably know, as somebody works for one of those communities. So I think that's where a lot of that has come from in past conversations.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you. At the last meeting on Friday, we had a lot of tech issues, and there were folks in the room who couldn't read the comments online. And so I'm not going to be reading generally the chat, because given that this is a strictly online meeting, you should all be able to see the chat. But in a couple of these comments, I think I will pull periodically, particularly this question that just came in about, are the comments and survey results representing municipalities, regional and state organizations combined? So could we address that just from a technical standpoint?
I think the question goes to the point of cross-tabulation, if that's what's being asked. I mean, yes, they're combined. They're all combined in one. But to do a deeper dive to say the municipalities said this and the regional and state organizations said that, that would take a cross-tabulation. Is that the question?
That was the question. Yeah, it just seems like it would give some insight into what the municipalities themselves are saying, particularly given the prior conversation about bottoms up and tops down and empowering communities. Just might be really interesting to see, are there more consistencies between what municipalities are saying, what regional organizations are saying, and what state organizations are saying, and understand who the message is coming from.
Yeah,
yep,
thank you.
I agree.
One thing that I didn't think to mention, just for the benefit of everyone, when you make a comment, if you could just say who you work with or what your affiliation with, I think that will help all of us understand your background better. So Stephanie first, and then Erica after you.
Sorry, I'm taking up more than my fair share of commenting. But I just wanted to add to that. I think that's a really good point. My name's Stephanie Carver. I'm with Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. We're located in Saco, but we have communities in York, all of York County and parts of Oxford County. And one other question that I had was kind of seeing it from a geographical standpoint, looking at, the needs of rural communities versus more urban communities would be interesting to us, because we kind of have a little both. So I think the data would be interesting in terms of if there's any difference in their needs or the comments that were made relative to their needs.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Erica, go ahead.
So I'm Erica. I'm the land use planner at AvCog. So just following up, thinking about, municipalities and talking about empowering them to do the plans. I think a big thing here, working at the regional standpoint, is we want to do what is helpful to the municipalities so that they can work on the plan and be aware of what's going on. I think it's just finding a way to have that move down through the resources. So I know right now it's kind of hard, like just so many towns don't have the capacity, the staff, the knowledge to really even just get started on the process. So I think the intention behind having it at the regional level is that we can kind of be the first stop in that, where you contact us, we can talk to you about the knowledge that we have and set you up so that the town can then, work more on the plan. But I definitely appreciate the sentiment of the municipality having a lot of say in the plan, because it's the town they're living in, the town they're working in, and they should have a huge input in that. But I think the intention with the regional councils is kind of to be that bridge between the state and the towns, that they can have another resource to go to, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, precisely. Thank you for that. Terry, go right ahead. And Terry, if you could unmute and then let us know your affiliation.
Yeah.
I'll come back. Oh, there you
Okay,
go.
so, all right. So there are a few of us here. We're from a very small town, Brownfield, in Oxford County, and population around between 1650 and 1700. We have no zoning right now. We have a lot of long-term residents who I think are afraid of zoning, afraid of what changes a comp plan is going to mean to their community. So we were fortunate to really be able to reach out and kind of socialize the plan a lot before it finally got voted on and to get approved. And it was approved by the state as well. Our challenge now is implementing the plan and getting enough people on board to help with all of the various strategies, goals that we have in the plan. We find that even when people are in agreement with what they see in the plan, they don't want to be on committees. They don't want to have to go to meetings. A lot of people say, just tell me what you want me to do and I'll do that. I was wondering if others have experienced the same thing. We find when we reach out to the state, they're tremendously helpful. And we've gotten a few good people to come and speak with the town about opportunities that are out there, and that's very encouraging. They've been very helpful for us, but it's difficult to get people on board to really help with the implementation of the plan.
Sure.
So any thoughts would be welcome.
We did it ourselves.
Yeah, we actually wrote the plan with a small committee of people, surveying the town residents and putting in all the effort to write the plan and get it completed and passed.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the question, and certainly folks feel free to respond to that in the course of the conversation. But I suspect that there are many, many towns in Maine that have the same situation with limited local capacity to do a lot of very hard and complicated work. So I'm going to just pivot us a tiny bit to same question, but we're basically, did the survey questions or our conclusions miss anything? I'm noting Miriam's comment a little bit ways back, that local opposition is a huge barrier, but it doesn't feel like our conclusions have any big ideas to help address that. So, that is a missing element, or it could be seen as a missing element. Other missing pieces, either on the conclusion side or that we just simply didn't include it in the survey itself. Okay. Go ahead, Michael. And Terry, I think if you want to, I think I'll assume that your hand is up from the previous comment. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. One of the things that occurred to me, and I don't know if it really would have been super reasonable to include this, but in a lot of the conversations we're having, it occurs to me that just planning in general tends to, like, the history and theory of it is very urban focused, and I'm constantly kind of at a loss for looking for good, like, rural planning or examples. And I know some of that is just I don't know if it's like law of numbers. It's like there's so many more people, there's so many bigger cities that do more. But I feel like if there were like good, elegant solutions for how to deal with the conservation and reining in sprawl, because right now that almost seems like the natural reaction for a lot of the conversations that I'm having with the two communities I work with, which by the way, I'm in Damascata and Newcastle. I'm the town planner. Almost naturally gravitate towards we need to build more infrastructure and we need to sprawl. And I guess it's the issue is that I'm seeing is like planning doesn't really scale down. It seems like a lot of the theories and stuff that I learned, and we gotta figure that out, like what the good planning is going to be. And that just like is a kind of a big thing. I'm not sure if it would have been reasonable to assume that we're going to get into that here, but it's not even like I don't feel like there's any like really brilliant minds that are like, oh, they figured it out if we could just implement it. As much as it is for like big city, like build a new subway. So
yeah,
hopefully that was clear.
Thank you. Yeah, Janice, I'm wondering if you're wanting to respond to that.
Yeah, so Janice Avignon, Town of Long Island, citizen planner, I guess, because we don't have any planning staff, but I was involved in the comprehensive plan and the implementation committee. But one thing that seems like it was missing, and not just from the survey, but in general, there's a lot of talk about capacity and technical expertise, which I don't even know what that means. I mean, we use it a lot, the term technical expertise, to kind of mean anything that we don't have expertise in, but we can learn a lot from each other. So I'm not sure that all this guidance coming down from above based on what, big cities are doing is going to help the rural communities, and we can learn a lot from each other. So one thing that I didn't see was, there's training and there's guidance, but what about just learning from each other? We're part of the Main Island Coalition, and it's incredibly powerful just to get together quarterly and see what each other is doing. So, what didn't seem to be coming out in comments or questions or conclusions was, some facilitation help from organizations, whether it's regional or state, to help us just learn from each other on who's doing what well and how did you get that done in your tiny little community with no capacity. So I think, maybe we're not experts, but we're getting the job done, and we're getting our comprehensive, like the woman before me just said, she got her comprehensive plan done, approved by the citizens, approved by the state. So did we, with no consultants, know anything. The town's all on board, but how do we get the resources to keep going, even though we have an implementation committee? And I don't think it's always more training and more guidance is the answer coming from the state, or nothing against the regional or state. They're fantastic resources, but we can also just kind of be copycats and not reinvent the wheel if someone else has already figured it out in a town. Doing
so the sort of question around sort of potentially more networking opportunities to learn from one another.
Case studies, just highlighting what's working.
Great. Yep. Thank you. I'm going to pivot us just so that we get through all of the questions in the time that we have. So if we could pull up the question 4, comments and conclusions. And again, this is looking at, what are the state barriers that are most significant in moving growth toward locally designated growth areas. Reactions, surprises around either the comments or, that you sort of drew different conclusions. And if you need a reminder, just as you're looking at those, the particular the particular state barriers that were noted to get a reaction about were lack of financial incentives, no requirement to adopt zoning ordinances, lack of guidance in identifying types of growth areas, lack of coordination among state agencies, and lack of requirement for building codes in towns with a population less than 4,000. And if you'll recall, the lack of financial incentives, of course, was most significant, but lack of coordination among state agencies was also high up there, although Judy did speak to a number of things that are underway to be addressing that in part. So reactions to all of this? I'm taking that as possibly the conclusions are on point, that you agree with these conclusions. If we should be interpreting that differently, please let us know. And then also, you know, did we miss something? Is there something missing in the conclusions, or that the survey just didn't ask and probably should have? Michael, go ahead.
I'm more than happy to be going. Well, I don't love that I'm going first, but I'm happy to throw out some ill-formed ideas and hopefully prompt more conversation. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for the state to help, or regional to help. I think the code enforcement and MUBEC question is a tough one. One of the things I was thinking is that could be really helpful is almost if the state created like defaults for towns to adopt and say, like, we don't have the resource to go out and create our internal process from scratch. So if the state were to define and say, like, here, just adopt this administrative process, it meets all the state statutes and everything, that could be really helpful, that then towns could maybe build off of. And kind of anything that I feel like the state could, especially administrative stuff, take off of the town's plate so that the town can focus on like the implementation, would be kind of nice and could possibly promote some consistency. I know, like, going from one town, even just working in two towns, trying to figure out, like, oh, when an application comes in, what is the first step? When do we have to have this done by? What's, if the state had like here's how you do it, just adopt these policies, that would be helpful. And I'm sure there's plenty of other opportunities. And I appreciate that kind of conflicts with my original, like, just let us do it. But why can't both be true?
Thanks for that. Other thoughts at all on this? Okay. All right. Well, then I'm inclined to move us along to the next question. And if we need to jump back to this, that's fine. But if you want to pull up, oh yeah, that's right. There were two sets of comments and conclusions associated with this question. So did I stopped looking at the screen for 1 second, Judy. Is this the second? And was that just pulled up, or did you toggle between the two?
This was the second one, yeah. That there were additional observations, and it was really sort of other barriers across all the local, state, what are the other barriers? We talked about local and state, so what are the other ones?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll give you just a few more seconds with this slide, and then we'll move on to question 5. All right, let's do that. Then question 5, conclusions and comments. You'll recall this was structured a little bit differently to choose, the 3 strategies that best supported housing in designated growth areas. So I'll give you a moment to read these comments and conclusions again, and then open it up for any surprises or reactions to this to this summary? So while we didn't identify ourselves up front as to who's a municipal planner and what all of your affiliations are, I'm curious for the municipal planners on the call, if this squares with your experience that yeah, it seemed like, if I'm recalling correctly, Judy, it's financial incentives to redevelop vacant buildings, encouraging mixed-use development standards, and funding for infrastructure installation, upgrade, or extension were the highest percentages of receiving the highest percentages, those ideas did. Does that square with your experience? Michael?
I can say maybe this is what is meant by flexible standards. I think maybe clear standards is the would be most useful. I feel a lot of the projects that I've been seeing and conversations I've been having, people don't seem they come in and are like, what can I do with my property? They have no idea, and it's not. I don't think that their questions are about like, well, can we get rid of this? It's like, am I allowed to do it or am I not? And it's hard for me and for the code enforcement officers that I work with is like, well, I'm gonna have to research that and get back to you. It would be really great if we could be like, yeah, you can probably do that. Like pull together a plan in line with that. And I think maybe just case in point that kind of everybody or a lot of communities deal with is shoreland zoning is not the easiest thing to wrap your head around. And just cleaning that up would be cleaning up the ordinances and cleaning up the processes. And maybe this is just the two towns I work in, but I think that would go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Other missing elements.
I also just I didn't raise my hand, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to plug mentoring and internship. I think that would be super valuable. That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, here.
Yeah, I agree with what Michael just said, and I know something that I've thought about quite frequently is if there's a way. I know we've kind of discussed it in the past here and there about educating code enforcement officers, but I just wonder if there's a way we can try to do that starting from like high school, college. I think a lot of people don't even know what entails working in civil service, and it's something that they might be interested in. So I think if we try to put a little bit more of an emphasis on that at the educational level, it might be useful. The earlier you hear about these things, the better. I know I randomly found out about planning from applying for a job and was like, that's what I want to do with my life. But I think it'd be nice to introduce some of these things a little bit earlier. So the more you think about it, the better. And if we could get some people that are excited and want to do this work, then sign them up.
That's great. Thank you. Jessica, go right ahead. Just need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. So to Erica's point, I think educating the citizens of the towns, the public, planning boards more about what a designated growth area actually is would go a long way. I agree also with the statement about the shoreline zoning. I would say, at least where we work, where KV-COG, the region we cover, I would say most people have less than no clue about like any of the standards and regulations in the shoreline zoning. I mean, it's unfortunate, but they are confusing. They're super confusing.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks. Okay. An emphasized point. So duly noted. Jay, go right ahead.
I guess I would echo the same comment, on the entire comprehensive planning process, and when you say that, the residents approved it, well, yeah, it's probably 1 or 2% at best of the population of the community. And I would dare say that the rest don't even know what a comprehensive plan is. And I just lost track of where I was going with that. So I guess I'll be quiet, but
That's okay.
I agree. I think it's the, the education of the whole planning process.
Yeah. Well, so what is missing? Issues that didn't get raised by other commenters in the survey, or that the survey did not ask? Anything that we should be capturing there? Michael, go ahead.
I'll try and keep it brief. I think something that Erica said was important, and the role of code enforcement, I think, is extraordinarily expansive, at least from what I've seen, and defining what all the hats are. It seems to me like the code enforcement officers I work with, it's like, if we're not sure who's going to do a thing that's related to planning, kind of is like, man, the code enforcement officer will do it. And then there's too many hats. So that seems like maybe defining that could be beneficial.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. I'm sorry. Grain?
Grania.
Grania, so sorry.
Hi.
Go right ahead.
Yep, this is Grania with KB Cog. I think something that's missing, and I don't actually think it was really addressed a whole lot throughout the survey, was, some of these towns, their entire plan for the comprehensive plan is no growth. They don't want growth. And, that's, that is a strategy. And, if that's what they want to run with, we can't really change their minds and how to accommodate this no growth mentality while also trying to balance that, whether you like it or not, you're going to have some new structures in town in the next 10 to 12 years.
I really appreciate you raising that, Grania, sort of the elephant in the room that many towns are experiencing. So thank you for raising that. Other things that are missing? All right, well, why don't we then move on to question 6, which, upfront acknowledges the state's somewhat limited ability given home rule, but what the state can do in the growth management law or rule to improve implementation. These, I'll give you a moment to review again the comments and the conclusions, and then get your reactions to them. And again, the issues that the specific items or ideas that Judy pulled out to highlight were establishing standards that, if adopted, grant preferred funding status for smart growth strategies, and then secondarily tying financial incentives to adoption of growth areas and place types. Thoughts on these conclusions?
I'll just jump in to say that these cover a lot of items that I know are on my mind, so there's a lot of good content involved here.
Great. Good. Michael, go ahead.
Thank you for not making me go first. The accountability needed, debated. A lot of those, I think I generally agree with the sentiment, but I worry. I think like a regional planning boards overriding local ordinances could potentially result in like actual riots. And the 10% affordable housing mandate, which again, I think I agree with the intention. I worry you just like get to kind of stall out any development. And so yeah, I'm hesitant to endorse state review of local ordinances. Mainly, I'm gonna pick on shoreline zoning again because that's not exactly a model ordinance that I'm like, oh, the state they figured it out. So
yeah, thank you. Judy, go ahead.
So I just wanted to clarify, I'm not sure if you meant this, Michael, but I just want to be super clear that the comments on the left, those are not what the department is recommending. Those were in the comments, just so super clear. Just wasn't sure if that was being interpreted that way.
Yeah, thank you. Jay, go ahead.
Did you say Jay?
Yes, I did. And
Yeah.
remind us who you're affiliated with.
Yeah, well, Northern Maine Development Commission in Caribou, Maine. I ultimately, I guess I have a feeling that it's awful hard to improve implementation when the state really doesn't have any skin in the game. And I'm trying to be careful how I say that. You know, right now, all of our local comprehensive plans are being funded completely by the community. And I think they're implementing the strategies that they want to implement. They feel that they paid for it. They've gone through the planning process. And it may not be land use, it may not be housing, it may be more along the lines of, you know, recreational trail development, and maybe, you know, something along those lines. So I guess I agree with the comment of need to provide funding and TA and have some skin in the game to meet the goals. And I can tell you again, from an Aroostook County perspective, I think the last thing I would want to do would be going to a local planning committee and or planning board and saying, by the way, if you're not implementing your plan, someone regionally is going to implement that for you, because I'd be out of that town office pretty quickly.
Yeah, all of these comments are pointing toward incentivizing and certain and not mandating. No surprise really here. You know, and so I'll just leave it at that. Missing elements on this one, things that the survey didn't ask, or conclusions that weren't drawn that you think should have been. Okay. All right. Well, then let's pivot to, there were 5 questions that had to do with, you know, essentially, you know, whether you agree or disagree with various ideas for revising the growth management law. I'll just remind you what they are as you're looking at these comments and conclusions. Whether Maine statutes should be comprehensively updated so definitions are consistent within and across various titles. Strong support of that. Whether rate of growth ordinances have been identified as a barrier. Rate of growth ordinances have been identified as a barrier to affordable housing and should be prohibited because Maine has a housing affordability crisis. That receives significantly less agreement. Many folks were not sure about that. that the law should require that comprehensive plans are supported by an analysis of relevant data as determined in rules. Strong support of that. And then secondarily, the same thing, but as determined by local planning committee, that too had very, very strong support, not quite as strong as in rules. Finally, the question of that whether additional state agencies should be added to the statutory list requiring that state funds for implementation and growth-related investments are directed to growth areas. Basically half of the people responding thought yes, and a lot weren't sure about that. So just comments at all on any of those topics? Okay. All right, that's fine. And if you felt like anything was missing from these conclusions. All right. Well, that's fine. I think then maybe what we'll do is just do a summary of what's happening next, which is tomorrow. Judy, do you want to switch over?
Sure. The final set of questions focus on the technical assistance needs that towns have identified, we have identified, and we've asked for people to prioritize them. So it'll be a shorter focus group, and because this is the last cluster of questions, and we will be asking you to prioritize because everybody wants everything. I'm starting that presentation and sort of, yes, we want this, yes, we want that is all over. So it's going to be tough to prioritize because funds are limited, but we need to do it. I'm also thinking that it might be useful in the third focus group to provide something of a summary of what we heard in the first two meetings. There was a lot in this, and then there was a lot in my notes. I have 6 pages of notes from today and 15 pages of notes from, I do write big, but still, from Friday. So I'll put my head together with Joan and Jody on how to try and come up with some kind of a summary of what we heard that will be part of tomorrow's focus group. So I just finished by saying thank you very much. And this is not easy stuff, and we're not going to solve all these problems with this survey, but you've provided us with some very helpful information. And just super encouraging to have this kind of engagement. So thank you.
Yeah, and same link for tomorrow, same Teams link.
Yep.
And 12 o'clock. So we'll hopefully see some of you again. And Judy and Joan, if you could stay on the line briefly, that would be great. But thank you, the rest of you. Enjoy your evening.
Yes.
Thanks for your time. Will the slides of this be available in the future?
Yes, and this whole event is being recorded and it will be posted, and the recording from Friday is already posted on the MPAP website. We'll summarize all of that tomorrow too, where the recordings all are.
Great. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.